My car broke down in the middle of a rainy night, and the only door I knocked on by mistake was the house of a mafia boss. Antonio De Luca opened the door, his eyes cold as steel. Before I could say I need to call for help, he pointed a gun straight at my head. "No one knocks on my door by accident," he said. I trembled trying to explain that I was just a mechanic making a delivery. But then he stared at me so long I could barely breathe, as if he recognized me. When he kept me there for questioning, I saw an old photo in his room. A short-haired child standing in the middle of a blood-soaked crime scene. And that child was me. I didn't understand why, but Antonio De Luca only said one thing. "From now on, you're not leaving this place. My name is Lena Morris." I was soaked to the bone, standing in the pouring rain, my truck dead on a mountain road in the middle of nowhere. It was past midnight, and I'd been driving for hours to deliver a crate of engine parts to some guy in the next county. My phone was useless. No signal, no bars, just a blank screen mocking me. The wind howled, slapping wet hair against my face, and I could feel the cold sinking into my skin. I'd been scraping by as a mechanic for years, fixing cars, patching tires, doing whatever paid the rent. But this felt like the universe was laughing at me. I grabbed my jacket, slung my bag over my shoulder, and started running toward the only light I could see, a big house up the hill, glowing like it didn't belong in this storm. I didn't think twice. I just needed a phone, maybe a tow truck. I didn't know I was about to knock on the wrong door. When I reached the porch, my boots squished with every step. I banged on the heavy wooden door, my knuckles stinging from the cold. It swung open, and there he was, a man in a dark suit, his face sharp and unreadable eyes like knives cutting through me. He didn't say hello or ask if I was okay. Instead, he leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "Who sent you?" I blinked, confused, water dripping off my chin. "I just need to call a tow truck," I said, holding up my dead phone like it explained everything. He didn't move, didn't blink. A shadow shifted behind him, and I saw the glint of a gun in his hand. "No one knocks on my door by accident," he said, his words like ice. My stomach dropped. I didn't know where I was, but I knew I'd made a mistake. He stepped aside, motioning me in, and I hesitated. The rain was pounding, but something about this guy made my skin crawl. Still, I was freezing, and I didn't have a choice. I walked inside, my wet shoes squeaking on the polished floor. The house was huge, marble chandeliers, the kind of place you see in movies. Two guys in suits appeared, one grabbing my bag, the other blocking the door. "Wait," I said, my voice shaking. "I just need a phone." The man with the gun, Antonio, I'd later learn, looked at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "You're not leaving until I know why you're here," he said. I wanted to argue, but the way he stood up, the way the air seemed to bend around him, told me this wasn't a man you crossed. As they led me through the mansion, I caught a glimpse of a framed photo on a side table. A little girl, maybe 5, clutching a stuffed bear. Her eyes looked familiar, like a memory I couldn't place. I stopped, my fingers brushing the frame, but one of the guards shoved me forward. "Keep moving," he growled. My heart was racing, not just from fear, but from something else, something tugging at the edges of my mind. The photo stayed with me, a ghost I couldn't shake. They locked me in a room upstairs, some kind of office with leather chairs and a desk bigger than my kitchen. I sat there, dripping water on the floor, while Antonio stood across from me, his arms crossed. "Name," he said, not a question. "Lena Morris," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't write it down, just stared like he was waiting for me to crack. I didn't. I'd grown up in foster homes, bounced around, learned to keep my head down and my mouth shut. But this was different. This wasn't a landlord yelling about late rent or a customer complaining about a bill. This was a man who could make people disappear. I could feel it. Before I go on, I need to pause for a second. If you're watching this, if this story is hitting you the way it's hitting me, to tell it, could you do me a favor? Grab your phone, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. It means the world to me, knowing you're out there, listening to my story. It's not just a story, it's my life. And I want to share it with you. Okay, let me keep going. They locked me in that room for hours. No phone, no answers, just a guard outside the door. I paced, trying to make sense of it. My truck breaking down wasn't anyone's fault. It was just bad luck. But the way Antonio looked at me like I was a threat made my stomach twist. I started noticing things, the way the guards whispered when they thought I wasn't listening, the way one of them smirked when he brought me water. "Boss likes him feisty," he said, laughing as he walked away. I ignored him, but it stung. I'd spent my life being invisible, too poor, too plain, too unimportant for anyone to notice. And now here I was, trapped in some mansion being mocked by men with guns. I sat on the edge of a chair, my hands clenched, staring at a painting on the wall. A woman with dark hair, her smile soft but sad. Something about her felt familiar, like a song you've heard but can't name. A few hours later, a maid slipped into the room, her eyes darting nervously. She handed me a folded piece of cloth, a handkerchief embroidered with a delicate C in the corner. "She wanted you to have this," the maid whispered, barely audible, before scurrying out. I unfolded it, and a tiny key fell into my palm, cold and heavy. My breath hitched. I didn't know who she was, but the handkerchief smelled faintly of lavender, the same scent as the dress I'd been forced to wear. I tucked the key into my sleeve, my fingers brushing the fabric, and felt a surge of defiance. Whoever left this wanted me to keep going, to fight. I wasn't just a prisoner here. I was part of something bigger, and I wasn't going to let them break me. Later, a guard tossed a tray of food onto the desk, cold soup and bread, like I was some kind of prisoner. I didn't touch it. Instead, I walked to the window, pressing my hand against the glass. Outside, the storm had calmed, but the mountains looked endless, trapping me here. I heard footsteps and turned to see Antonio holding a folder. He didn't look at me, just opened it and slid a photo across the desk. It was the same little girl from the hallway, the one with the bear. "Do you know her?" he asked, his voice low, almost gentle. I shook my head, but my fingers trembled as I picked up the photo. "Why do you have this?" I asked. He didn't answer, just watched me, his eyes searching for something I didn't understand. That's when I knew this wasn't just about a wrong door. This was about me. They moved me to another room, a bedroom, but it felt like a cage. There was a dress laid out on the bed, silky and expensive, nothing like the jeans and flannel I wore. "Put it on the guard," said, tossing me a pair of heels. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. He didn't laugh back. "Boss's orders," he said. I stood there holding the dress, my hands shaking. It wasn't mine. It didn't belong to me. But I put it on because what else could I do? The fabric felt wrong against my skin, too soft, too delicate. When I walked out, the guards snickered. "Look at the mechanic playing princess," one said. I kept my head high, but inside I was burning. I adjusted the strap of the dress, feeling it slip off my shoulder, and caught my reflection in a mirror. I didn't recognize myself, not the dress, not the place, not the fear in my eyes. That's when she walked in, Marai. She was everything I wasn't. Tall, polished, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "So you're the stray Antonio picked up," she said, circling me like a shark. Her voice was smooth, but her eyes were venom. "You're wearing her clothes. You know, his wife's." My heart stopped. I looked down at the dress, suddenly feeling like I was drowning in it. "He doesn't keep people around for no reason." Mara went on, her lips curling. "You're just a shadow of her. Don't get comfortable." I wanted to snap back to tell her she didn't know me, but my throat was tight. I just stood there, gripping the edge of a table, my nails digging into the wood. Mara leaned closer, her perfume sharp and overwhelming. "You'll never be her," she whispered, then turned and left, her heels clicking like a countdown. At dinner that night, I was forced to sit at a long table with Antonio's men, their eyes crawling over me like I was on display. One of them, a wiry guy with a scar across his cheek, leaned forward, his fork tapping the plate. "So Lena," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "You think you're special, huh? Showing up here, wearing her dress." The others laughed low and cruel, their voices blending into a hum that made my skin prickle. I set my fork down, the clink loud in the sudden quiet. "I fix engines," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "What do you fix?" The laughter stopped and his face hardened. I pushed my chair back, stood, and walked away, feeling their stares burn into my back. I didn't look at Antonio, but I felt his presence heavy and still at the head of the table. Antonio came in later, his face unreadable as always. I couldn't take it anymore. "You don't get to do this," I said. my voice louder than I meant. You don't get to lock me up, dress me like some doll, and treat me like I'm nothing. He didn't flinch, just looked at me with those eyes that saw too much. I have my reasons, he said, and walked out. Reasons? What reasons? I was just a mechanic who knocked on the wrong door. But the way he said it, the way he looked at me, made me feel like I was missing something. Like I was part of a story I didn't understand. I sat on the bed, the dress still clinging to me, and noticed a faint lavender scent on it. It wasn't mine, but it stirred something, a memory of a woman's hand brushing my hair, a voice humming softly. I shook it off, but it wouldn't leave me. The next morning, they brought me to a dining room all crystal and gold, like something out of a movie. A man sat at the table, younger than Antonio, with a smile too charming to trust. I'm Rico, he said, standing to kiss my hand. His grip was too tight, his eyes too curious. You're the talk of the house, he said, pouring me wine I didn't ask for. A mechanic, huh? Must be good with your hands. His tone made my skin crawl, but I smiled back just enough to keep him talking. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. You know Antonio's not as untouchable as he seems. Stick with me and you might get out of here. I sipped the wine, letting it burn my throat, and set the glass down hard. I fix cars, not alliances, I said. His smile faltered just for a second, and I knew he wasn't my friend. That night I couldn't sleep. The room was too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your thoughts scream. I kept thinking about Mara's words, about the dress, about Antonio's reasons. And then I heard a creak outside my door. I froze, my heart pounding. The door opened and a shadow slipped inside. Before I could scream, a hand clamped over my mouth, and I felt the cold edge of a knife against my throat. I fought, kicking, clawing, but the guy was strong. Then the door crashed open and Antonio was there, gun in hand. A shot rang out and the man dropped, his blood pooling on the floor. I was shaking, gasping, trying to make sense of it. Antonio knelt beside me, checking if I was hurt. You're okay, he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. But when I looked at the dead man's face, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was Rico, Antonio's brother. The air in the room felt heavier after that, like the walls were closing in. Antonio didn't say much, just cleaned the blood off his hands with a rag and told me to stay put. I couldn't. I followed him down a hallway, my bare feet silent on the cold floor, until we reached a locked door. He hesitated, then opened it, revealing a small room with a single chair and a table. On the table was another photo, the same little girl, but this time with a woman, her face soft and kind, holding the girl's hand. Antonio's jaw tightened. That's my wife, he said, his voice barely a whisper. And you. I stared at the photo, my breath catching. I didn't remember her, but my hand shook as I touched the frame. What does this mean? I asked. He looked at me, his eyes raw. You were there when she died, he said. You saw everything. The next day, I was alone in a study, surrounded by books I'd never read, when a guard tossed a newspaper onto the desk. My face was on the front page next to a headline screaming, DeLuca's secret weapon. The article called me a manipulator, a nobody who'd wormed her way into Antonio's world. I crumpled the paper, my hands shaking with rage, and threw it across the room. A maid cleaning nearby flinched but didn't look up. I caught her eye and saw pity, not scorn. She slipped me a small folded note before leaving. It read, "You're not what they say." I held it tightly, my knuckles white, and felt a spark of strength. The world could call me anything, but I knew who I was. I tucked the note into my pocket and straightened my shoulders, ready to face whatever came next. Antonio didn't trust anyone, not even his own blood. The next day, he pulled me into a room filled with screen security footage flickering. You're a mechanic, he said, pointing at a busted camera system. Fix it. I didn't argue. I needed answers as much as he did. My hands moved fast, rewiring, checking circuits, anything to keep my mind off the night before. As I worked, I noticed Antonio watching me, not like a prisoner, but like he was seeing me for the first time. When the footage finally came up, we saw it Rico meeting with a man I knew, Harris, my old friend from the neighborhood, the cop who'd always looked out for me. My stomach twisted. Harris was working with Rico, and they were both after Antonio. I dropped the screwdriver, the clatter echoing in the quiet room. Antonio's hand brushed mine as he picked it up, and for a moment, I didn't pull away. Days later, I was alone in the garage they'd set up for me to work on their cars, probably to keep me busy. The smell of oil and metal was the only thing that felt normal. A guard dropped off a box of tools, but something was off. Tucked inside was a note scribbled in Harris's handwriting. "Get out now or you're dead." My hands froze, the paper crinkling in my grip. I looked around expecting someone to jump out, but it was just me and the shadows. I tore the note into pieces and stuffed them in my pocket, my heart hammering. Harris had been the one person I thought I could trust, the one who'd bought me coffee when I was broke, who'd promised to help me start my own shop. Now he was threatening me. I tightened my grip on a wrench, the cold metal grounding me, and kept working, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was running out of time. Things got worse after that. Harris went public, calling me a DeLuca spy on the news. My face was everywhere. Grainy photos from security cameras, headlines saying I was some kind of criminal. I'd spent my life staying under the radar, and now the world was tearing me apart. At a party that night, some kind of mafia gathering Antonio dragged me to Mara made it worse. She spread lies, whispering to everyone that I was trying to seduce Antonio for power. I overheard her, saw the way people looked at me, their eyes full of disgust. Then it happened. A woman, one of Mara's friends, grabbed my arm, yanked me to the floor. "You don't belong here," she hissed, her nails digging into my skin. The room went quiet, everyone staring. I looked at Antonio, waiting for him to say something, anything. He didn't. He just watched, his face blank. I pulled myself up, brushed off my dress, and walked out. My hands were shaking, but I wouldn't let them see me cry. Outside in the garden, I sat on a stone bench, the night air cool against my skin. I heard footsteps and tensed, expecting another guard or Mara's venom. Instead, it was Antonio. He didn't sit, just stood there, his shadow falling over me. "You didn't deserve that," he said, his voice low. I looked up, my eyes burning. "Then why didn't you stop it?" I asked, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. He hesitated, then pulled a cigarette from his pocket, lighting it with a flick of his lighter. The flame lit his face for a moment, showing lines I hadn't noticed before. "Because I needed to see who you are," he said. "And now I know." He walked away, leaving me with the scent of smoke and a question I couldn't answer. What did he see? That night, I started having dreams, flashes of blood, a woman screaming, a little girl hiding in a closet. I woke up sweating, my heart racing. I touched the back of my ear and felt it, a small scar, one I'd never thought much about. But it meant something. I could feel it. The next day, I confronted Antonio. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fear. He hesitated, then pulled out a file. Inside was a report, old and yellowed, about a witness protection program. My name was there, Lena Morris, age 5. A photo of a little girl, me, staring at the camera with big, scared eyes. I didn't remember any of it, but the truth hit me like a truck. I was the witness to his wife's murder. And Harris, the cop I'd trusted, had hidden me to use me later. During a sleepless night, I wandered into a library in the mansion, its shelves towering over me like silent judges. I ran my fingers along the spine, stopping at a worn journal tucked between two leather-bound books. It wasn't labeled, but the handwriting inside matched the note from the locket. It was hers, Antonio's wife. The pages were filled with sketches of flowers, recipes, and letters to a child she called her Light. My hands shook as I read one. "You'll find your way, even in the dark." I closed the journal, pressing it to my chest, and felt a sob catch in my throat. I wasn't her daughter, but I was tied to her, to this place, in ways I couldn't understand. I slipped the journal back, my resolve hardening. I'd find the truth for her, and for me. Antonio's voice was quiet when he spoke. "Rico killed her," he said. "Not our enemies. My brother." I could hear the pain in his voice, the kind that doesn't go away. I wanted to hate him for keeping me here, for turning my life upside down. But I saw something in him, a man who'd lost everything just like me. We started working together, piecing things together. I wasn't just a prisoner anymore. I was someone he needed, someone he trusted. And somewhere along the way, I started to trust him too. It wasn't love, not yet. It was something deeper, like two people who'd been through hell and found each other in the ashes. One night, as we pored over files, his hand brushed mine and I didn't pull away. He looked at me, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen, and I felt something shift like a door opening. I didn't know was there. But the world didn't care about that. Word spread that Antonio was weak because of me. Mara got her hands on a photo us together, his hand on my face a moment I thought was private. She leaked it and it spread like wildfire. Rico used it to turn the others against him. A boss who loves a pawn is no boss, he said at a meeting, his voice dripping with contempt. They locked me in a basement cold and dark while Antonio faced a mafia tribunal. I heard whispers through the walls, gunshots shouting the sound of everything falling apart. I was alone, banging on the door, screaming for someone to hear me. All I could think about was Antonio, wondering if he was alive, wondering if I'd ever see him again. I curled up on the floor, my hands pressed against the cold stone, and felt a tear slip down my cheek. I wiped it away, angry at myself for breaking, and vowed to get out. In that basement, I found a loose brick in the wall, barely noticeable in the dim light. I pried it free, my fingers raw, and behind it was a small metal box. Inside was a key and a folded letter written in a woman's handwriting, Antonio's wife. "If you find this, you're the one," it read. "Keep him safe." My breath caught my hands trembling as I held the key. It wasn't just a way out. It was a message, like she'd known I'd come. I tucked the letter in my pocket and used the key to unlock a hidden panel in the wall, revealing a narrow tunnel. I crawled through dirt, smearing my face until I emerged in a storage room filled with files. That's where I found the drive, the one with Rico's confession. My hand shook as I gripped it, knowing this was my only chance to save us both. I don't know how long I was down there. Hours, maybe days. But I wasn't giving up. I found a piece of metal, a rusted pipe, and started working on the lock. My hands were bloody by the time it clicked open. I ran through the house, smoke in the air, gunfire echoing. I found a room with the computer files scattered everywhere. And there it was, an external drive with Rico's voice confessing everything. He'd killed Antonio's wife, planned to kill me, planned to take it all. I grabbed it and ran, my heart pounding, not knowing if I was too late. The house was a maze, but I kept moving, dodging shadows, my breath loud in my ears. I passed a mirror and saw myself dirty, bruised, but alive. I straightened my shoulders and kept going, the drive burning a hole in my pocket. The tribunal was in a warehouse, dim and packed with men in suits. Antonio was in the center, hands, tied, blood on his shirt. Rico was talking, his voice loud, accusing Antonio of betrayal. I didn't think. I just walked in, holding the drive like it was a grenade. "Listen to this," I said, my voice cutting through the room. I plugged it in, and Rico's confession played, his voice echoing off the walls. The room went silent. Rico's face went white. Mara screamed, pulled a gun, and fired. I braced for the hit, but Antonio dove in front of me. The bullet hit Rico instead. Blood sprayed, and Antonio fell, his eyes locked on mine. "You freed me," he whispered before his eyes closed. I knelt beside him, my hands on his face, willing him to stay with me, my voice breaking as I whispered his name. Chaos broke out. Men shouted, guns fired, but I was on my knees holding Antonio's hand, begging him to stay with me. He was alive barely, but the empire was crumbling. Mara was gone later. I'd hear she took her own life. Rico was dead. The news called it the DeLuca collapse, and my name was dragged through the mud again. They said I was a criminal, a traitor, a nobody who brought down an empire. I didn't care. I went back to my old garage, hiding from the cops, from the world. Every night I saw Antonio's face, heard his voice. I thought I'd lost him. I thought I'd lost myself. I spent my days fixing cars, my hands moving on autopilot, but my mind was stuck in that warehouse, replaying his fall. His words over and over. Back at the garage, a kid from the neighborhood showed up, no older than 16, with a busted bike and wide eyes. He stared at me like I was a ghost. "You're her, aren't you?" he said, holding out a crumpled magazine with my face on it. "The one who took down DeLuca." I froze, the wrench in my hand suddenly heavy. "I didn't take down anyone," I said, my voice sharp. He didn't back off, just grinned. "They're scared of you now," he said, like it was a secret we shared. I looked at him, at the hope in his eyes, and felt something shift. I handed him a wrench and nodded at the bike. "Fix it yourself," I said. "I'll show you how." As he worked, I saw myself in him, someone the world overlooked, but who kept going. I smiled the first real smile in weeks and felt a weight lift. One evening, I was closing up the garage when a customer walked in. A woman older, with kind eyes and a scarf tied loosely around her neck. She handed me a small package. No return address. "Someone wanted you to have this," she said, then left before I could ask questions. Inside was a locket, old and tarnished, with a photo of the same woman from Antonio's pictures, his wife. My hand shook as I opened it and a tiny note fell out. "You were always enough." I clutched the locket, my throat tight, and sat on the garage floor, the weight of it all crashing down. I wasn't just a witness or a pawn. I was someone who'd survived, who'd fought, who'd mattered. Then one night I heard a knock. My heart stopped. It was just like that first night, the rain, the fear. I opened the door and there he was. Antonio, thinner, pale, but alive. "You knocked on my door once," he said, his voice rough. "Now it's my turn." He held out a key, the one to that mansion where it all started. "This time it's yours." I didn't know what to say. I just stepped forward and hugged him, tears streaming down my face. We weren't a boss and a prisoner anymore. We were just two people who'd walked through hell and come out the other side. I felt his arms around me, steady and warm, and for the first time I believed I could let go of the past. We left Italy the next day. The mafia, the lies, the blood. We left it all behind. I don't know where we'll go or what comes next, but for the first time I feel free. Not because of him, but because of me. Because I kept going even when the world tried to break me. You know what that's like, don't you? To be unseen, underestimated, judged for who you are or where you come from. But you're not small. You never were. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.